China and how the U.S. engages it in trade is key to reviving the American economy. This, according to the CEO of the second largest steelmaker in the United States. That's DiMicco. He's the chairman and CEO of Nucor Corporation, and he, together with the chief executives of a dozen U.S. manufacturers, met with Vice President Joe Biden just last week to discuss ways to boost U.S. job growth. He joins us now this morning from Charlotte, North Carolina. Good morning to you, sir. I ran through some of your...
Margaret.
Good morning. I ran through some of your points here, and I'm interested to hear from you how the Vice President reacted. Specifically, you are suggesting we balance the trade deficit. You want more drilling of energy, natural gas, oil, nuclear energy here at home, and you want to spend more money on infrastructure. What was the reaction to these suggestions?
Well, first off, the Vice President came in and talked to us for about 15, 20 minutes and then left. He did not stay for the dialogue that took place, but we did have several cabinet members there. Secretary of Labor, Larry Summers was there, and also the Secretary of the Department of Commerce, Gary Locke, was there. We had a number of business leaders from around the manufacturing sector, as well as economists and government officials. And it was a very good meeting. Basically, we went around the table and were asked if there was one thing that you wanted to see get done, what would it be? And so everybody had their opportunity to speak at length on their one issue. Of course, everybody took the liberties of doing more than one issue. It was a good meeting. It was a constructive meeting. It was well received by the cabinet and all the officials that were there. We actually discussed a report that was being put out by the President's manufacturing advisor and team called, it basically is the revitalization of manufacturing in America. And there were 7 items that were included in that framework that were listed in that report. And the top 2 items that we discussed in that meeting and the issues that I in particular discussed had to do with the trade deficit, mercantilistic trading practices of our trading competitors. I don't really consider them to be partners if they're not trading by the rules they agreed to access to our market.
Well, if I can jump in here, you laid out this argument that you're talking about right now in an editorial a few weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, and you are referring there to China. Specifically, I'd like to quote you back to yourself here. You said we need to balance our trade deficit, and you used some strong language here, saying we need to correct the mercantilist and predatory trading practices of our principal trading competitors. Competitors, not partners. Like China, they won't be partners until they stop using illegal trade practices like currency manipulation, subsidies, and border-adjusted taxes. The date jumps out at me. That was December 15th, just a few days after China rolled out some duties on steel makers. How much of a reaction was that?
Well, first of all, my comments had nothing to do with what they had their action at all. It was a trivial action, to be honest with you. And it has to do with the last 10 years of mercantilistic trading practices that we've allowed to go on in various administrations. Now, let me be clear about a couple things. First, while China is the perpetrator, the problem is in our leadership in Washington. The administrations over the last 20 years, our Congress, who've allowed them to continue to abuse the trade laws and allowed them to continue to not execute on the promises they made to us to have access to our market. Free trade has to be rules-based. And for us to be major exporters in the world, we also have to have a trading system that allows us to deal with mercantilistic trading practices, illegal trading practices coming into our country. If we can't compete at home with the world, how are we going to compete around the world and export?
But, sir, when you're criticizing China there with some of those unfair practices, here at home, the Buy America provision that's in the stimulus package encourages and requires companies to use American-made products for some of these infrastructure programs. Plenty of people call that a subsidy.
Well, listen, China and every other country in the world has their own procurement policies that don't allow other countries, manufacturers to participate. China is probably the largest one that does that in the world today. Number two, the Buy America provision, as it's written, we are spending taxpayer dollars, and the idea is to create jobs, 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 and you don't do that by sending those jobs overseas when you're building infrastructure at home to create jobs.
All right. Thank you so much for laying out your argument.
I wish we had more time.
I do too. Dan DiMicco, the CEO of Nucor Corporation.